From you.
From me.
Yeah.
Welcome to Vishal and Company, where Equity Guru's own Vishal Tura, Taku Ndachena, Colin Botrell, and Maddie Grace examine the week's financial events in real terms, bringing the esoteric blur of public market activity into sharp focus. So come in, sit down, put your feet up, and enjoy.
All right. Hello, welcome to this week's edition of Vishal and Company. This week, Vishal is going to give us some quick market updates, talk about the effect of the U.S. election on the markets and Bitcoin's earnings. TK is going to give us an update on what's happening with some of the big banks, as well as looking at some updates with big companies like McDonald's, Brookfield Asset Management, and Walt Disney. And lastly, Colin is going to be going over what is happening in the gold market. I am the resident not finance person to try and keep all these guys in check if they're not making a whole lot of sense. And that is that. All right, Vishal, all yours.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, some people would say that the markets are not making a lot of sense. Markets reacting in a way that I think has surprised people. On our Tuesday election show, we were saying that either the markets were pricing in either a Biden victory or pricing in, a non-contested election, right? Because the one thing that the market hates is uncertainty. And it just seemed that we wanted to get past that and continue the rally forward, right? So if you are a longtime follower or reader of my work, I sort of have been saying that what is propping equity markets now is this hunt for yield, right? So regardless, of who probably wins the election, that's not going to change because we are still going to be in a system of more debt and more money printing. And we'll go over what the Fed said yesterday because it is still pointing to that. A lot of other people believe that the market actually was not moving due to the election, but was actually anticipating the Fed announcement, right? So that came out yesterday. And then there are the other few people who believe that the markets are going up because all these fears of a Democrat president and higher corporate taxes and socialized healthcare and that kind of stuff. It's not really going to happen if you have a Republican Senate. So a lot of people are saying because of that stalemate, the market's not, or Wall Street's not worried about, increase in corporate taxes and such. But once again, if you have been following my work, I have said that these markets are propped due to this case of cheap money and hunting for yield. And we've talked about this in previous shows, but as you can see here on the election day, we had a pretty decent pop the day after, an even better pop. And as you can see, folks, on the S&P, we're less than 2% away from new record all-time highs. If we do not break above that, then there is a danger. I'm just going to get my fancy arrow tool here. There is a danger that we could just continue to range within, this zone here that I have marked out. Of course, if you guys remember, we were talking about this being a potential topping pattern. But this is why we do wait for our breakdowns. We were watching the support zone, which is a price floor. That's what it acts as. And you can see here, price just bounced off of it rather than breaking below. So for those people who are very bearish, I know there's a few people on our trading Discord channel saying, hey, no, market's going to sink because of this and that. But as I said, folks, there's all this pension money, all this retirement money. If you yourself were trying to retire, you can't really go into bonds anymore. You can't really go into real estate anymore. It's really stocks where you get the real yield. So this is going to continue pretty much forever until they pull the plug, I guess. So that's really what's holding the markets, right? So you got to look at this larger macro perspective. And as you can see, similar patterns on the NASDAQ. Of course, I think the NASDAQ's actually doing quite well today because a tech company, a NASDAQ company, Tesla, just started selling Tesla tequila. And that's been sold out at $250 a bottle. So that's probably going to show up really well on their earnings. And that's maybe going to cause, when Tesla and Apple stock really do impact the NASDAQ the most. So maybe that's what we're seeing here with a nice, we're near the highs of the day in today's NASDAQ candle there. And then, of course, the Dow as well. This is the one that's lagging a little bit. You can see here that the all-time highs near, not exactly at 30K, but at 29,500. is a bit further away compared to the NASDAQ and the S&P, which, could potentially break into all-time record highs next week, right? So don't be surprised by that, folks, because we do believe that the bigger issue is the Fed, the Federal Reserve, central banks, and we've spoken about this before, about their monetary policy, right? So I know, TK, you're an economics student. Do you think they have more ammunition?
Honestly, at this point, it's more of wishful thinking
Yeah.
that's keeping them. But I think if I was to kind of use the economic stuff, I would say they've run out of quantitative easing measures,
Right.
but they're basing their interest rates off. I forgot how we term it, but it's giving confidence to the market that they're gonna hold interest rates at that level. It's
Quantitative
they don't actually have to do it, but they're giving the market confidence that they will try their best to do it. And this can mean many things. I mean, they might start buying actual equities, which
right?
hasn't happened in the Fed. But it's just more, it's giving the market confidence that no matter what happens, we're going to be there as a safety net. And it's one of the policies that's used when a central bank has nothing else,
Exactly.
nothing else in its ammunition.
So just to further TK's point, central banks generally have three options, right, to move markets. They can either use rhetoric, which is what they tend to use, right, where they'll tell market participants, hey, we're probably going to do this, and then the market will price that in. So, for example, we know the European Central Bank is likely going to be expanding their QE program in December. But we'll get to that when we talk about the dollar, because I think there's a big currency play here. And then the other two more extreme cases are actual quantitative easing or interest rate cuts, right? So they are using the rhetoric. That's what they use most of the time. They have already cut interest rates close to zero, but they can still go to zero, right? So there's still 25 basis points, I believe, that they can cut, which means quantitative easing is left, and it's likely going to follow Japan and the European Union, European Central Bank, where they might, and the Swiss National Bank, which apparently is the best performing hedge fund in the world right now, where they might start to buy equities. But I just want to quickly read what Jerome Powell said. The economic activity and employment continue to recover. Inflation is held down by oil and weaker demand, but continues to target our above 2% inflation target. They're going to maintain accommodative monetary policy. So that's a big one that the markets wanted to hear. They're committed to using their full range of tools. And as we just said, there's a debate about, do they have those tools left? They're going to increase purchases to smooth market function. So this one, this one was an interesting point, because on the same day, the Bank of England actually increased their quantitative easing by $1.2 trillion. So a lot of people were expecting maybe the Fed will follow suit. As I said, we know the Europeans are targeting around December for their increased program. So again, when we get to currencies, I think that's what really matters. And then, of course, they ended off by saying that the path of the economy now depends on the course of the virus. Maybe a little quote here that investors do not like: when the time comes after the crisis, we will put our emergency tools back in the toolbox. Will the markets be able to stay propped if that happens, right? So this is the whole idea of, is the markets addicted to this cheap money, and really what is propping them up, as I believe it is.
Do you know what's so funny, Vishal? With most of his rhetoric, it's kind of telling what he's, because I think the Bank of Canada did the same thing,
right? Yeah.
For until 2023. But not to nerd out on this, but if your central bank is telling you we're going to print money to stimulate, I say print money here as a classical economist, but to keep inflation close to 2% as their target.
Yep.
And we will continue to print until our money rate is close to zero.
Right.
That means in real terms, their interest rate is negative.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, right. So that's we're just not there nominally yet, which a lot of people are saying could happen. But of course, the Fed is always like, oh no, we're never going to go into negative rates. But you just never know, and we'll find out. And that sort of ties in with our next section about the dollar, which I'll get to quickly. But just a few other points. Powell did say that the housing sector has actually fully recovered from the downturn in the United States. And again, just the committed to the full range of tools and the purchases to smooth market function. They're still doing 120 billion per month. And this is mostly treasuries and also the junk bonds, right? The high yield bond ETFs, the corporate bond ETFs that they're buying. And this is the other part, and it gets to, you know, how much ammo they have in their toolbox, right? Powell did say that we are doing everything, you know, using all the monetary policy tools that we have, but you guys need to remember all we're doing is putting money, you know, we only have lending powers, right? We can't really spend, and that's where the government has to step in with their fiscal policy to actually put money into people's pocket so then they can actually spend money to try to boost the economy. So this whole, you know, battle between monetary policy and fiscal policy, you know, everyone's been talking about the stimulus in the US, which is the big news, and that's going to continue regardless of who is the president, and there's probably going to be much more stimulus packages. And just, you know, getting to that point, I want to talk about this drop here in the dollar, a very, very big drop here, but I just want to go to the weekly chart because I want to show you this trend line going back to 2012, and the dollar is testing a support zone. So again, a price floor, but this uptrend slope here, and there is a chance that the dollar might drop here. And, you know, some people like this, some people don't. So what are the positives and negatives of a strong or a weak dollar? So first of all, a weak dollar, if you're an American citizen, it sucks because your purchasing power, you know, it's decreasing, right? You have to spend more weak currency to buy something. And we here in Canada sort of know a lot about that with the dollar getting weaker and things getting more expensive. But that's the whole definition of inflation. If you are in the American stock market, it's good for you, right? Because a weaker dollar, again, now it takes more cheaper dollars to buy a share of a stock. And that's really what's causing stock prices to rise, right? So if you're an American citizen, it sort of sucks. But if you're an American citizen investing in U.S. stocks, you know, you are, you know, trying to come out ahead, obviously, with the real gains there. If you are the U.S. government, a weaker dollar is great because we all know about the money printing and all the debt the government has. This makes it cheaper, right? The debt is cheaper. What would help even more is if they go into negative rates to try to, you know, handle the interest payments that the U.S. government has to pay. But a weaker dollar is good for bigger deficits because it means you're using cheaper dollars now. For a foreign nation, if you are a foreign nation with U.S. dollar denominated debt, so an emerging market, it's great for you because, again, now you're paying back the U.S. or you're paying back U.S. dollars in cheaper currency. But I think the big negative is if you are a Canadian, a European, a British citizen, from Australia, from New Zealand, because since we are in a floating currency system, what this means is, of course, if the dollar is getting weak, it means all the other currencies against the dollar are getting stronger. And I've talked about this as something that the Europeans do not want, because do you guys know what's like the best way to cause an economic recovery? TK, you probably know about that.
Make your debt payments more expensive.
Well, I mean, generally they want to cut interest rates to zero to weaken the currency, right? To boost exports. So the Europeans, you know, the Germans want to export more cars and chemicals, so they want a weaker euro to do so. The Japanese want a weaker yen as well, because then they can export their you know, their anime, their cars and electronics and all that kind of stuff. So that's why Greece wanted to leave the Eurozone, right? Because they have no control over the euro, and they wanted to control interest rates or weaken the currency in order to boost the economy. So at this point where the whole world or the Western world is pretty much at 0% interest rates, and they want, you know, that was the way to weaken your currency at a time. But when everyone's at zero and the Fed is, you know, maybe acting on moving the dollar, as I talked about in geopolitical terms there, it means that the Europeans cannot control their currency. The Swiss franc is decreasing here. As you can see, the Canadian dollar is also getting stronger when it moves down. The loonie is getting stronger. Same thing here with the Aussie and the New Zealand. And this is what I mean by currency war, right? You're at a point now where all these countries do want a weaker currency in order to try to boost their economy due to COVID. And this is why, in my personal opinion, people are looking into gold and silver, because these are best ways to hedge against the fiat currency war that's already happening, I believe. And then this gets to an interesting move here. Bitcoin. Colin, you've been watching the Bitcoin price here?
It's tough to miss. It's quite the move.
So I know, like on Twitter, I bet you that's what everyone's talking about. That's probably been trending as much as the elections. But as you can see here, a big pop on Bitcoin past 14,000, and we are really at another resistance. Pretty much, we did touch that, believe it or not, or close to that at 16K. And after that, folks, the next one or the next level is all-time highs, close to 20,000 American dollars per coin of Bitcoin. And why I'm saying this is because I do believe, some people do believe, that there's all these utility uses for Bitcoin and cryptos. I'm more of a guy looking at crypto as a way to get out of fiat currencies, which is why I look at gold and silver. So I find this really interesting with Bitcoin spiking. And yes, I do know that a whole bunch of corporations have got involved with it, but I find it very timely that Bitcoin's rising. We got that breakout in gold and silver as well. So I just want to show you my daily chart here. This trend line, this was a big resistance zone. So everything is beginning to pop here while the dollar is beginning to drop. And as I mentioned, this is the currency war, right? If you are the Bank of Canada right now, the Bank of England, you're watching the Americans' currency weaken, you're asking yourself, oh crap, how do we weaken our currency? Because a weaker dollar means a stronger Canadian loonie, and we have to do something about that to boost our economy. So, Tika, do you really follow the currency markets as much, or?
I honestly don't follow them as much. The only part I probably look at is hedging, companies that hedge if they have like international operations.
Right.
But that's
right.
as much. Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to leave you guys with today on my part. I think that this dollar chart is what you really should be watching going forward. And I hope I've given you some pros and cons about a stronger and weaker dollar there.
I'm personally liking the dollar.
So you'd be
it means
buyer.
I can buy US equities with
Right.
cheaper currency.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to pass it on to TK. He is frozen, so
okay,
that's terrible timing. At least he's got a cute smile in his.
TK had some earnings that he wanted to talk about. I know he was looking at Visa last week. But yeah, Visa.
I'm going to throw it to Colin to go over the gold market, and we'll wait for him to join back up.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to talk about gold, the gold space, as Maddie's mentioned there. It kind of seemed like it was almost a no lose scenario, kind of going into the elections here. Money was going to be printed either way, like Vishal alluded to. There's some uncertainty, so it's kind of a perfect storm. And we over at EQUITY.GURU like to kind of look at some of the juniors. So a couple that we've kind of been watching are Kuya Silver. So they actually did a RTO at the beginning of October. And they've looked like they've potentially bottomed. They've got a really nice asset in Peru, though, and I've got trouble speaking. They've got a nice asset in Peru there, so that's one to be looking at. I know that Vishal likes his silver place.
Colin, man, I know you're up under your technicals now. Tell me what pattern this is, dude.
That is one of our favorites, the inverse head and shoulders.
There we go. It's looking nice.
Yeah, so that's a junior to watch. There's a bunch going on in the precious metals. There's another one that's actually a client of Equity Guru, and that's Nomad Royalty Co. They are a streamer. They've got cash generating assets. They do a quarterly dividend. So they've kind of come off a little bit of a bottom there too, a little bit of a safer play in a kind of in a precious metals bull market too. So,
Colin, could you tell us why like you would prefer a royalty?
I mean, there's less volatility there. They're kind of invested in good assets for you. So it's almost like in investing in a pool of producing assets. Is that a fair thing to say?
Well, I would say also like they have less debt, right? As some of the miners, and I know we talked about this before, but even if gold price falls, a lot of the good management in these royalty companies have small, employee base and can pick up good deals. Good management will pick up good deals even when gold's going down. So you have a catalyst, regardless of the price of gold going up or down, and you're getting that income all the time, right, from these sales of gold or silver or copper or whatever else is part of that royalty. So I think it's a very smart way. I think I'm a big fan of royalty companies.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that I can't pass up an opportunity to comment on is the massive move in the Canadian cannabis space.
Okay.
We'll get to MSOs in a minute there, Vishal, but let's look at ACB, Aurora Cannabis.
On the Canadian exchange. Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're
that's a
talking.
pattern too, dude. You know what pattern that is.
Rings a bell. Rings a bell. One of our faves again with the inverse.
Yeah, double bottom.
Double bottom there, yeah. So yeah, huge move there. Even Kronos, I know that's one that you've been talking about in the Discord group.
And I'll walk you guys through that. We were watching this other pattern, what we like to call a cup and handle here. And I was advising people, we like to wait for the breakouts, which means either wait for a nice strong close above, which was happening yesterday. And I did post in our trading channel that, hey, you guys, it looks like that breakout's happening. You might want to jump in here. And today we had an almost 22% move.
Quick question. Can you explain why this is happening in the cannabis market?
Colin, you're probably the right guy to talk to about that.
I mean, the speculation is that with Biden looking like a shoo-in for the presidency at this point, he's going to open up. He's basically going to give some of these LPs potentially access to the U.S. market through some kind of federal legalization, because at this point, the Canadian companies just don't have a way to kind of penetrate that's a U.S. space legally. So if Biden Harris presidency happened and they did some decriminalization things, that may give these guys an avenue into just a much bigger market in the States. So
you posted on our trading Discord channel as well that there were actually some states that also voted for legalization of cannabis and also shrooms, I believe, right?
Yeah. Oddly enough, Oregon actually decriminalized all drug use, I shouldn't say all drug use, but they decriminalized like small possession for personal use of pretty much all drugs,
including crack and cocaine, right?
That's a good question. I don't know if you're safe with crack in Oregon just yet, but certainly going that way.
I read they have, but it's it's a very small amount, and the fine is, if you get caught with it, it's $100 fine, or you go to rehab, which is paid by the government. So it's the same model like used in Portugal and I believe even Switzerland. So there's European success models regarding this. Netherlands too, probably.
Nice. That's awesome. And then Washington, D.C. Legalized mushrooms, and then Arizona and New Jersey both legalized recreational cannabis sales. So pretty huge for the U.S. space there as well. So big stuff happening in precious metals, big stuff happening in psychedelics, big stuff happening in cannabis, obviously. So pretty exciting time, honestly.
So I'm going to pose a question here, Maddie. If you were given 50,000 to invest right now, would you be jumping into the cannabis space, the gold space, or the psychedelics here? And I'll pose the same question to Colin as well.
Okay, with not nearly as much knowledge as Colin, I feel like I'd say psychedelics.
Psychedelics, okay.
But I think it's because I don't understand gold enough yet as a
Right.
whole concept.
So I'm just curious about the psychedelics. Like, do you like? I know Kevin O'Leary is big in psychedelics. So, like, does that kind of stuff influence you? Like, have you heard it from
Taking them or selling them?
But I'm just curious. You know, is that getting its way out? Like, you know, to the average. I'm just, you know, I'm not using it as a derogatory term, but just like an average Joe person who's not really familiar with markets. Like, is we know cannabis used to be like that. Is psychedelics sort of getting that exposure now?
I just feel like with what I'm around, not like many drugs or anything crazy. My family's watching. But no, I just feel like microdosing on mushrooms and stuff like that is so much more common now. And it's sort of like becoming this up and coming cool thing. Whereas if I had a choice, I know cannabis is like, I don't know, doing well, but I feel like it's like, oh, that's come and gone. Whereas psychedelics feels like something new.
And you don't get the smell too, so that's probably.
There you go.
How about you, Colin?
Well, I've been on the cannabis train for a few years now, so I'm kind of sticking to that.
Okay.
So that's where I'd be going. But you know, like Maddie said, the psychedelic space is definitely interesting. I mean, I don't think there's as big a market in terms of like recreational use or anything like that, but there's certainly like lots of discoveries to be made there that could down the line really be kind of game changers. But what about you, Vishal? Where do you lean?
So I've been a gold bull for a very long time. So with my take on the dollar and stuff, and just showing you this chart, right, the GDXJ, which is a gold miner chart, a very interesting pattern here that I'm looking for a breakout, and I just want to highlight, a similar pattern that I saw in gold, right? So this downtrend range here before we broke out, and we moved. What is this? About 48%, right? So I'm seeing something, and I'm just going to go back to the GDXJ, something similar to that playing out here. So I'm big onto GDXJ. I gotta admit, I am finding the psychedelic side very interesting. Like the idea with cannabis, there's always that debate between the smoking part and the CBD oil, like itself, like what's the more healthier thing as well. But I do find the producers, right, like the cannabis producers who grow it, I think that's maybe a much more of a safer investment. What do you think about that? Like, would you call that a safer investment, Colin? Because I'm not too familiar with the cannabis stuff as much as you are.
I mean, buying on the Canadian side, you're essentially buying growers.
You are, okay.
Buying in the States, the producers in the States are vertically integrated, and what that means is that they're basically growing and selling, and if they're offering any CBD extracts, things like that, they're also making those as well. So,
what are like top 3 or 5 producers that you can just name off your top of your head here?
You mean like in Canada, or?
Let's do a mix if you can. I mean, whatever's easier.
I mean, the sector leader in most people's opinions at this point is a company called Curaleaf. That's probably the biggest multi-state operator in the U.S.
Curaleaf?
Curaleaf, yeah, CURA is the ticker.
Okay, in Canada. There we go. Okay. Oh wow. Okay, $14.
So that's the biggest company in the States. I believe their market cap is I couldn't even could comment on it accurately at this point. Actually, I haven't looked in a little bit here. So, but
sorry, team. Just for time's sake, I'm gonna pass it on to TK. We have him back now. I'm gonna give you like a tight 4 minutes, 3 if you can. I'll be really impressed.
Thank you, Maddie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I'll just touch on it quickly. But it's mostly commercial real estate.
Okay.
And kind of look at two of them. Two that we are looking at the rates, and they haven't recovered because most people are still anticipating shutdowns in the next coming months. It's not as clear here in Canada and the US if there will be shutdowns. Well, the US more than Canada because of the election. But a lot of some of the commercial real estate companies are still grossly undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
I would have gone into more of the valuation stuff and how to look at it and what people should look out for. But if I was to play the safest bet, it would be Brookfield Asset Management. It has one of the largest portfolios of commercial real estate in Canada and has a small growing portfolio in the US as well. It pays a really good dividends for investors who like that. It's a little bit more of a capital appreciation play.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's pretty undervalued and it hasn't recovered fully like the general stock market. And the reason I believe that most of the commercial real estate is still down is because of bankruptcies, small business bankruptcies. They've been higher than they have since 2008. And now instead of just being focused in the financial sector, there's a lot of them in retail. Some of the bigger chains have also gone bankrupt in the last few months. Some are still filing for bankruptcy. Some are still in liquidation, selling off their assets.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of uncertainty around commercial real estate. But we're always going to have a recovery in it once the healthier players come through. And Brookfield is one of them. It's not a cheap stock, to be completely honest. But it is a good play if you want to go into the commercial real estate place and get a good dividends and wait for all this uncertainty to kind of disappear. Yeah, that's what I had to share.
I'm just showing people on the charts that they're not just in commercial real estate, but they're in renewable energy, oil, everywhere.
In infrastructure as well.
There we go.
It's a good play if you want to get on into more of the alternative investments outside of. None of us can invest in a bridge here, but Bridgeway gives you that access.
Alrighty. Just really quick, I'm not one to say I told you so or claim an early victory, because as we know, that's not part of the democratic process. But if you take a look back at our last video, I polled all the boys about who was going to be the next president, and you can just check out their answers. I was the only one who said Biden, though. Just putting it out there. The not finance optimist here.
A few weeks ago, I would have given you a prize.
You haven't counted all the votes yet.
But I said I'm not claiming early victory. We know it's not democratic.
Kind of sounds like you are, though.
You know what? Next time we'll see. I'll either look like an idiot or the smartest person in the room.
What's another election? We have to hear from Maddie's crystal ball for the next. Is this probably an election in Europe or something, right? We can pick on too.
Oh gosh, I'm just so happy. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.